just got handed one of the most powerful titles in the British monarchy. And the way it happened tells you everything about where this royal family actually stands right now. No press conference, no official announcement, no carefully worded statement from the palace communications team, just a late-night meeting, sealed documents, and a king who apparently decided that certain things needed to be locked down before anyone outside those.
Most of the coverage focused on the ceremony, the robes, the crowds, the music. What most people missed was the paperwork. Quietly, without a press conference or a carefully managed announcement, King Charles extended the designation of Counselor of State to Princess Anne and simultaneously elevated her husband, Sir Timothy Lawrence, to Knight Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order. Two moves, both deliberate, both made at a specific moment. And together, they tell you more about the real state of this monarchy than anything that has appeared on the front pages in months. This is not a ceremonial gesture. This is a structural decision made by a king who is being practical about his own health, honest about the institution's limitations, and very clear about who he trusts. Let's talk about what it actually means, what the Counselor of State designation actually is. A Counselor of State is not a ceremonial title. It is a constitutional mechanism. When a monarch is unable to perform their duties due to illness, absence abroad, or incapacity, Counselors of State step in. They can hold privy council meetings. They can sign certain documents on the monarch's behalf. They are, in the most practical sense, the people who keep the institution functioning when the person at its head cannot. For most of Charles's reign, the Counselors of State were defined by statute, a group that included, among others, Harry and Andrew, both of whom are no longer in any position to perform that function. Harry lives in California. Andrew is effectively removed from all royal duties. The Counselors of State Modification Act 2022 addressed this gap, allowing the king to extend the designation to Anne and Edward. This is now formally in place. What that means practically is this: if Charles's health requires him to step back from duties, temporarily, partially, or in a more sustace way, Anne is constitutionally empowered to act. That is not a small thing. That is the institutional equivalent of handing someone the keys. Why Anne and why now? The question worth asking is not whether Anne deserved this. She clearly did. The question is why now? Why this specific moment in this specific reign? The answer sits in the numbers. In 2023, Princess Anne carried out 457 royal engagements, more than the king himself, more than William, more than anyone else in the working royal family. She has been doing this since she was a teenager. Not because it generates headlines, it largely does not. Not because it builds her personal brand. Not because anyone was watching. Because she understands, in a way that is almost old-fashioned in the current climate, that the title comes with a responsibility that is non-negotiable. You show up, you do the work, you do not ask for recognition. Charles has watched his sister operate on that basis for 50 years. He knows exactly what he is getting when he places constitutional authority in her hands. He is also being honest, in a way that is frankly more admirable than most monarchs have managed, about the reality of his own situation. A king who has been managing a cancer diagnosis publicly, who has maintained his duties with genuine discipline, but who understands that discipline is not the same as permanence, is making sensible structural decisions. This is not dramatic. It is practical. And practicality right now is exactly what the institution needs. Timothy Lawrence, the elevation nobody discussed. The second move, Timothy Lawrence's elevation to Knight Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order, received considerably less attention than it deserved. The Royal Victorian Order is the monarch's personal gift. It does not go through government channels or committees. It is a direct expression of gratitude from the sovereign himself. At its highest rank, Knight Grand Cross, it places Timothy alongside Queen Camilla, Catherine, and Sophie. That is the company he now symbolically keeps in terms of royal acknowledgement. Timothy has spent roughly 30 years being almost entirely invisible by royal standards. He is Anne's husband, a former naval officer, polite and composed in every public setting and almost never in a headline. In a family where minor figures attract constant media attention, that level of discretion is not accidental. It is a conscious choice maintained consistently across 3 decades. He received no princely title when he married Anne. He has never held an official royal role. He has spent 30 years standing 2 steps behind the woman he married and doing it without apparent complaint. The GCVO is Charles saying quietly and directly, "I see that. I am grateful for it. Your loyalty has not gone unnoticed." In the language of monarchy, where every ribbon means something and every gesture carries weight, that is a significant statement. The working royal reality, who is actually left. Here is the context that makes all of this most legible. The working royal lineup right now is thinner than it has been in decades. Charles is managing his health. Catherine spent much of 2023 2024 away from public duties during her cancer treatment and recovery. Harry and Andrew are both gone from active royal life, one by choice, one by necessity. The people carrying the daily weight of the institution are a much smaller group than even 5 years ago. Anne sits at the center of that group, William and Catherine when fully active, Edward and Sophie, and a supporting cast that is, by any honest count, stretched. Charles is not being dramatic by putting constitutional protections in place. He is being realistic about an institution that cannot afford to find itself without functional governance cover at a moment of internal pressure. The practicality of these decisions, the willingness to acknowledge the gap between the public image of an endlessly stable monarchy and the operational reality of a family navigating serious health challenges and significant departures, is actually one of the more interesting things about how Charles has approached this reign. He is not pretending. He is making structural decisions that protect what matters. The Anne and Camilla dimension, handled carefully. No account of Anne's position in this family is complete without acknowledging the complicated history that sits underneath it. Before Camilla Parker Bowles became queen consort, before she married Charles, after everything that preceded that marriage, she was married to Andrew Parker Bowles. And Andrew Parker Bowles, in the early 1970s, had a genuine connection with Princess Anne. It did not last. The reasons were practical and institutional. His Catholic faith made the union essentially impossible for a Protestant princess under the conventions of the time. They went their separate ways. Andrew reconnected with Camilla Shand, and the rest is, in a very real sense, royal history. That history never entirely disappeared. It was managed professionally, discreetly, in the way that Anne manages almost everything that has the potential to create institutional problems. Anne's position on Camilla's place in the family has never been made explicit in any public statement. What has been visible is a relationship that is functional, professional, and managed with the kind of discipline that Anne applies to everything. The famous moment, Anne's choice not to curtsy to Camilla after the coronation, generated considerable commentary. Whether it was a deliberate statement or simply a reflection of their shared history and the natural formality of their interaction is something only Anne knows. What it was not was unprofessional. It did not create a scene. It did not become a problem. Anne disagreed, or found the moment complicated, or chose not to perform a gesture she did not feel warranted. And then she got on with her 457 engagements, that is, in its own way, the most Anne thing possible. What this says about the monarchy right now. Step back and look at the full picture. A king managing a cancer diagnosis who has been more publicly honest about his health than any British monarch in living memory. A daughter-in-law who navigated her own serious illness with a transparency that felt genuinely new for this family. A princess royal being handed constitutional authority in a quiet signing. The gap between the public image of effortless, stable monarchy and the private reality has narrowed. Not because the palace suddenly became transparent, but because the circumstances made the performance of effortless stability impossible to maintain. And maybe that is not entirely a bad thing. The monarchy's long-term survival has always depended less on appearing perfect and more on appearing relevant and honest. Right now, this family is, perhaps despite itself, demonstrating both. Charles is not pretending to be well when he is managing a diagnosis. He is making structural decisions that protect the institution if he cannot be there. Anne is not claiming credit she has not earned. She has earned it across 50 years of showing up. Timothy is not asking for recognition he never sought. He is receiving a private acknowledgement from a king who values loyalty. These are not dramatic gestures. They are quiet, practical acts of a family doing what it needs to do to keep something important functioning. And in that, there is something genuinely worth watching. The Princess Royal Regent designation is the most visible piece of a picture that has been assembling quietly for months. But it is not the only piece. And when you look at it alongside Timothy's elevation, alongside Charles's public honesty about his health, alongside the thinning of the working royal roster, a coherent picture emerges. An institution lean, ing hard on the people who have always been there, recognizing the ones who never asked for recognition, and being for once honest about its own limitations. Whether that is enough to carry the monarchy through what comes next is genuinely uncertain. What is not uncertain is who Charles trusts when the moment demands it. Drop your thoughts below. I always want to know what you make of Anne's role in all of this. Like the video if it gave you the fuller picture. Subscribe to stay with the story as it develops. Take care. See you very soon.